there, my name is Kelly Ward. I am a graphic designer, and this course is going to teach you everything you need to know to get started using Adobe Photoshop. So this course is for absolute beginners. You do not need to have any previous graphic design, photography, or Photoshop knowledge to get started doing the projects in this course. I will be walking you through actual projects using Photoshop. These projects will utilize lots of different tools in the software, and this is really going to help you learn the tools and the features that you need to know most about the program. So let's talk about what you're going to learn in this course. We'll start by learning about layers and how to adjust light and colors. You'll learn how to combine and cut out images to make collages. We'll spend some time working with text and making a social media graphic. We'll learn about cropping and resizing images. I'll walk you through retouching and editing photographs, and we'll learn how to use AI to remove and replace things from images. Together, we will learn the basics of how to create beautiful imagery and interesting graphics in Adobe Photoshop. So to get started with the course, I recommend downloading the practice files included in the description below. This will help you follow along with exactly what I'm doing in each section of the course. If you have any questions, please leave a comment on this video and subscribe to Cry Studio to learn more about Adobe Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator, and to learn more about graphic design. Let's get started. Before we jump into the course, let's reset our workspace. This will ensure we are looking at the same tools together so you can easily follow along. Go to Window, Workspace, and choose Essentials. You can also reset Essentials. Our screens should now look the same. All right, let's jump into the first course tutorial.
In today's tutorial, we are going to talk about how to work with layers in Photoshop while adding tones and filters to photographs. Go ahead and open an image that you'd like to use for this exercise. I'm using an image of lilies today, and if you need help opening a file, go to File, Open, and navigate to the file on your computer. If you don't see this Layers panel on the right side of Photoshop, go to Window and select Layers, and it should appear. First thing I'm going to do, there should be a layer called Background that includes the image that you have open. I'm going to duplicate this layer by right-clicking and selecting Duplicate Layer. Let's rename this duplicate layer Auto Tone and click OK. This should now pop up with a new layer on top. Another way to duplicate, you can select your background layer, click and drag it to the plus sign at the bottom. Select your Auto Tone layer and let's go up to your menu to Image, Auto Tone. Auto-tone is looking at highlights, undertones, and it's fixing little things in the photograph for me. Go to your layers panel, click the little eyeball next to auto-tone to turn that layer off. We're going to try another auto adjustment. Go back to our background layer and duplicate the layer again. So right click, click duplicate layer. Let's name the layer auto contrast and click OK. Go to your menu, image, auto contrast. So now you get a slightly different result. Let's quickly compare it to the auto-tone layer by clicking the eyeball on and off of these layers. So some of these auto adjustments will be better than others, and it depends on the photograph that you are making adjustments to and how it affects the image. Let's turn these two new layers off, and we're going to try one more adjustment layer. So go back to your background layer, right-click, say Duplicate Layer. Let's call this one Auto Color. Now with your auto color layer adjusted, go to Image, Auto Color. And this made yet another adjustment to our image to the colors in this photograph. It made them more blue, which was kind of interesting. But again, every photograph is going to adjust a little bit differently. Now let's practice reordering your layers and moving them around. Let's drag them into alphabetical order. So click and drag your layers into the right order. Now toggle between the new layers and pick your favorite. I think Auto Tone is my favorite. It's a little bit warmer on this photograph and all the colors are really bright and vibrant. So turn off all the layers that you don't like. Now let's save this document. Go to File, Save. I'm just going to add the word Edit at the end of this file. When we started working on this file, it was a JPEG. Now that we have layers and we want to keep those layers in the file, you have to save it as a Photoshop file or a .psd file. So click Save. You may get a pop-up at this point. Just click through and say OK. Now to close this file, you can just click the X in the tab, or you can say File, Close. So that's how to work with layers and make auto adjustments to your files in Photoshop. In this tutorial, we're going to look at levels. Levels are the best way to get shadows, highlights, and midtones of a photograph looking great. And it's a great way to do a quick edit on any photograph. So go ahead and open a file. I'm using a photograph of flowers. First thing I'm going to do is duplicate my layer. So I'm working on a fresh layer and I can compare it to my original. So with the background layer selected, I'm going to right click, select duplicate layer, and I'll call this layer levels. So to adjust levels, go to your menu, image, adjustment, levels. And you should get a pop-up that looks like this with a histogram. You can also easily get to the levels on a Mac by going to Command L, or on a PC, Control L. This histogram is showing me the amount of dark values in my photograph on the left, and on the right side is showing me the amount of light values in my photograph. And the middle are the midtones, or the grays. So how you adjust levels, so you essentially click, hold, and drag these little arrows at the bottom of your histogram. We see that there's a lot of darks in this photograph, and I can see that in the image itself. The image is rather dark. We want to use these hills as our guide. So we want to move our arrows closer to the hill to make the adjustments. So let's test this. First, let's click and drag the dark arrow over here, closer to our hill. So you can see that's making some of the darks in the background even darker. Just gonna adjust it, move it right about there, just a little closer to our hill. Let's do the same thing on the far right with our light colors. I'm gonna click and drag this arrow, and I'm gonna drag it a little closer to the hill. You can see that is brightening the photograph. It's actually starting to blow out some of the values in my image on some of the flowers, so that's a little too much. Just gonna go a little bit closer, right about there. So make sure you are looking at the image while you're adjusting, and make sure that you aren't overdoing it in the image. And then next, let's go to our midtones. Just going to click the arrow and move it a little closer to our hill. And that's just, again, it's just bringing some of those midtones, those grays out and brightening them up just a little bit. I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to click OK. Now I can compare this layer that we just worked on with our original by clicking the layer on and off. So there's my original, here's our adjusted image. The leveled image is just brighter, the lights are lighter, the darks are a little darker, and it just has a little more intensity. Now that I've adjusted my file, I want to save this as a brand new JPEG. I'm gonna go to File, Save. Photoshop automatically wants to save this as a .psd or Photoshop file. I now have some layers in my file. It wants to save those layers as the Photoshop file. For today though, I just want to save a new JPEG. So I need to click Save a Copy. I'm just gonna add Edit to the end of this file name. Instead of Photoshop, I want to save it as a JPEG. And now I'll click Save and click OK through any dialog boxes that you get. So that is how you make adjustments to a photograph with levels. In this tutorial, we are going to learn how to combine several images into one file using the Move tool. Here's an example of what we will be doing today. So first thing you want to do is open your files that you want to combine. You can find the exercise files for this tutorial in the description below. I'm going to navigate to My Files, File, Open, and I'm opening 4 JPEG files. Now that the 4 images are open, you'll see a tab open for each file. The beach image will be our background for this exercise. So I'm actually going to reorganize my tabs by clicking and dragging. The first image we're going to place in our beach image are these sunglasses. With the Move tool selected, this is the top tool in your toolbar on the left, we're going to drag this image into our beach image. So with the Move tool selected, click on the sunglasses, and you want to click and hold and drag your cursor to the tab where you want to drop the image, continue to hold, and then release your mouse. And the sunglasses should now appear on your beach image. If that didn't work or you had an issue, please try that again. You can also undo at any time by going to Edit, Undo, or Command Z on a Mac. So let's get the next image. The next image we're going to drop into our beach photo is the palm tree. So with the Move tool selected, click on our palm tree, click and hold, drag, drag, drag to our beach tab, continue to hold, and then release your mouse. You should now have 2 images on top of your beach photo. Let's go ahead and move them around a little bit. You'll notice we have layers that are created once these new images have been moved over. I want these to be aligned on the right side of the beach image. So I'm going to click and drag the sunglass photo, place it, and then next click and drag our palm tree photo and place it right underneath and try to align it as best you can. So now we have one more image to drag and drop, which is this flamingo image. Now this image is actually a different size. It's a really big photo. So we are going to have to resize it once we drag it over. But same process to start. With the move tool selected, click in the image and drag with your cursor to the beach image, continue to hold, and then drop the image by releasing your mouse. This photo is taking over our artboard, so we have to resize it and make it the same size as our other images. Let's zoom out of our artboard. We're going to use the zoom tool to zoom out. It's in the bottom of your toolbar. You click the zoom tool, and then at the top of your screen, you should see options to zoom in with a plus sign or zoom out with a minus sign. In this case, we want to zoom out so we can see more of the artboard. We're going to resize this flamingo image. With the layer selected, go to Edit, Transform, Scale. And now you should see the edges of our file. And we're just going to drag the edges of this file to make it smaller. So click an edge and start to drag it down. Now I'm going to move it to the space where I want it and continue to make it smaller so it is in line with our other images. When you are finished resizing, you can hit Enter, or you can also hit this little check mark at the top. Now I'm going to zoom back into my artboard. You can zoom way in to make sure that the alignment looks good. I'm going to adjust each of my images a little bit, make sure they're aligned. If you didn't resize enough, you can do it again and resize it a little bit more. Let's double check the alignment of all three of our images, make sure it looks nice and the spacing is even. Let's go ahead and save this file. Go to File, Save, and we will save a Photoshop file because we have multiple layers and we want to retain those layers. So that is how you combine several images into one file using the Move tool. In this tutorial, we will learn how to select and cut out parts of photographs to create a collage. This is the collage we will be creating today using two photographs. First, we are going to start by cutting out elements of this city skyline photo. You can find this photo in the description below. Let's go ahead and create a blank canvas to create our collage. So we are going to make our collage by going to File, New, and we will create a canvas that's 1000 pixels by 1000 pixels, 72 dpi. Click Create. Now let's go ahead and save this. Let's navigate back to the photo we want to use for our collage. I'm going to show you today various tools in your toolbar that you can use to make various selection types. Let's start with the marquee tools. The marquee tools are located here. If you click and hold, you'll see that several marquee tools appear. We are going to start by using the rectangular marquee tool. Let's practice using the rectangular marquee tool by selecting the sidewalk. So all you have to do is you click, hold, and you drag to make a selection in a rectangle. Once you've made a selection, you will see some moving lines around the selection. If you zoom in, you can see them a little better. I like to call these the marching ants because they kind of move to indicate your selected area. You can also make adjustments to these selections we're making today. So if I wanted to lighten or darken this selection, all I would need to do is open up an adjustment tool, like our levels, and you can lighten and darken this sidewalk. So this is the first element we'll add to our collage. Go to the Move tool, click into our selection, and click and drag, and drop this selection into our collage file. It's a little big. I actually want this to be much smaller and on the bottom. So I'm going to use the Transform tool or Command T and just make this sidewalk a little bit smaller in my design. All right, back to our skyline. Now let's say instead of the sidewalk, we wanted to select everything except the sidewalk. So the sky and the skyline. There's an easy way to do that by going to Select, Inverse. And that just moved my selection up to the top. So it selected everything except the sidewalk. You could also make a new adjustment to this layer. I'm going to make a saturation adjustment, make that sky a little bluer. You can also delete these selections pretty easily. You have to have a second layer, so I'm going to just duplicate my layer quickly and turn that background layer off. But you could also just delete a layer in your file. I'm going to click Command Z. So let's deselect our selection. Go to Select, Deselect. You can also do Command D on a Mac to deselect. Let's now go to our elliptical marquee tool. We're going to grab a circle out of this sky and put it in our collage. With the elliptical marquee selected, click into your bluest part of the sky. Hold down Shift. Starting at the top left, click and drag to create a perfect circle. And now with your Move tool selected, click into your shape, click and hold and drag this to your tab with the collage and drop it. I'm going to resize. Going back to my skyline photo, let's deselect this circle. Select, deselect. All right, let's go down the list to our next selection tool. It's called the lasso tool. With this tool, we are going to select this skyscraper building and put it in our collage. So let's zoom in. You can use your zoom tool or you can go Command +++. There are 3 lasso tools. I'll show you 2 of them, the lasso and the polygon. Let's start with the lasso. This tool makes a very freehand selection. So you can quickly just draw a circle around what you want to select, and you want to close your selection. So make sure you go back to the place where you started and then release. So you're clicking and holding the whole time. Let's deselect this and try the other lasso tool. Let's go back over here and select the polygon lasso tool. This is my favorite selection tool. I use it all the time. It allows you to select straight edges in a photograph much easier. So with the polygon lasso tool selected, I want you to click around this building, and all you do is just click, click, click. And you can zoom in as you're clicking, so you can get very detailed with this if you'd like. Okay, and I finished my selection. I ended where I started, so I closed the selection. And now you can see my marching ants around the selection. So let's say I actually wanted to add this little building down here. So with the polygon lasso tool selected, you can see my cursor has a little plus sign next to it. This means I can add to my selection. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to now trace or add to my selection by clicking around this little building here. And again, you have to close your selection. It now added to my selection. But let's now take it away again. So if I want to subtract it, you hold down the Option key on a Mac, you get a minus sign now. So if you click and hold that minus sign, now we can click around this building again to remove it from the selection. You got to close that selection. Now let's add this to our collage. Select the Move tool, click and hold and drag it up to our collage tab and drop it. And let's transform it, make it a little bit smaller. And I actually want the sidewalk to be in front of my building. So I'm going to move this sidewalk layer on top. Now let's deselect this building. We're going to add a little section of the skyline to the bottom of our collage. So I'm going to focus in on the left-hand side of this photograph. So the next tool down, you have a couple tools that I use very often, the Magic Wand tool and the Quick Selection tool. Let me quickly show you the Magic Wand tool. This works great on solid colors. So what it does, if you click into your photograph, it's going to select everything that's a similar color. You can easily add to your selection by hitting the Shift key and the Option key on a Mac to get that plus. You can also subtract. Okay, I'm going to go select, deselect. We're going to try the quick selection tool here. I'm going to zoom in a little further. And how this works is you just click and drag across something you want to select with your cursor. I'm going to make my cursor a little bit bigger. You can see it here. It's kind of small. I'm going to bump it up, bump up the size. So I'm just going to start clicking and holding and dragging across my skyline. And you can see it's starting to select things that it thinks I am trying to select. I keep clicking and dragging across my skyline. And you can see it's doing an okay job. It's not perfect. We are going to clean it up here in a second though. So I'm just going to keep adding to my selection. So that did an okay job. I can see a couple issues though. Right around the top of the skyline, there's some pieces that are missing. And then down here, it's selected part of this concrete step. I don't actually want that at all. So at this point, you can zoom in and then maybe make your little brush a little smaller. And you can get a little more detailed with this brush. You zoom closer in. So you can go along the top here, add, or you can also subtract by holding down the Option key. You can see that is now a negative sign in the middle. I'm going to go down here to my step and use the negative sign to try to just delete that concrete step that I don't want. You can also mix and match these selection tools a little bit. So if I was wanting to get very detailed with this, I would also use my polygon lasso tool to really hone in on my selections. So by switching to that tool, you could zoom way into your skyline and fix these little details. Remember, you have to close your selection each time. Last step, let's use our move tool. Let's take this selection we created and let's move it into our collage. And we want to drop this on top, so on front of the sidewalk. I'm going to reduce the size of this just a hair. Okay, and the very last step is I want to add a nice background where the white is right now. I'm going to open a file with a sunset in it. I'm going to click and drag this sunset into the back of my collage. So that's how you select and cut out parts of photographs to create a collage. In this tutorial, we will create a vertical social story graphic for Instagram in Photoshop and practice using the type tool. To get started, I already have a photo open of a surfer. Next, I need to create my artboard. Let's go to File, New. I'm going to use a mobile preset today, so I'm going to click over to the mobile presets, view all presets. There's a preset for 1080 by 1920 pixels. Let's select that one. All of my specs appear over here on the right, and let's just go ahead and click Create. So before we do anything, I like to go ahead and save my graphic to my computer. So go to File, Save As. The first thing we need to do is put this surfing photo into our artboard. So I'm navigating to my surfing.jpg, open image. Using the Move tool in our toolbar, I'm going to click into the image, click and hold, continue to hold on my cursor, and you're going to drag up to your graphic artboard and then release your mouse and it drops the photo onto your artboard. This is obviously too big, it's the wrong size. So we need to resize it and make it smaller to fit the artboard. I'm going to zoom out so I can see a little bit more of the artboard on the side. You can do that by using the zoom tool on the left toolbar or command plus and minus on your keyboard on a Mac. Let's go to Edit, Transform, Scale. I want to scale this image so that the surfer in this photo is on the bottom third of our graphic. So we want to put text on the top of this. So somewhere around here is perfect. Let's get started adding text. Using the text tool in your toolbar on the left, I'm going to just click into my artboard with the text tool, and it should populate some text for you, often lorem ipsum. If for some reason it didn't, click into your artboard with the text tool and start typing. You should see some words appear. If you still don't see words appear, it might be because your text size is too large. You can try adjusting that. So this made some lorem ipsum for me. I'm going to move it around with the move tool. So I just clicked and dragged it. The words we're going to use for the headline are surf clinic. So I'm going to click and select my text and type surf clinic. Let's next adjust this font and the text color. This little text editing box appears for me, but I don't really like this. It doesn't show me everything I need to see. So I like to use my character panel. Go to Window, Character, and you'll see lots of font adjustment options pop up in this character panel. Let's change the font here. I have installed an Adobe font called Cheddar Gothic Rough that I am going to use for this project. And I want this font to fill the space really nicely. So 100 pixels is too small. You can click on the drop-down menu to make it larger. Let's go really large. That's a little bit too much. Let's go 250. That's about right. And if you move your cursor right and left, you can adjust the font size this way too. Let's brighten this up by changing the color. Using the text tool again, I'm going to select the text. And in my character panel, there's a color box. If I click on that, I get this color picker that pops up. I want to look for kind of a lime green, bright yellow. That makes me think of surfing, makes me think of being out in the sun. So I think that would complement my design well. Use this rainbow box to kind of drag around and find a color that I like. You can adjust the hue of that color. Okay, I think that feels pretty nice. And I have nice contrast. I can see the text really well. Next, let's add some details about our event, this surf clinic. So I'm going to click the type tool again, and this time I'm going to click and drag a small box. It's filling it with lorem ipsum, and it's using the same font styles that I set up for my headline, which is not what we want. Something like Arial or Avenir, and make this text much smaller. So I'm going to drag this way down. So the details we're going to put in are the location and the date of our event. I don't think this detail text should be the same color as our headline. This color doesn't work as well in small text, so I need to use something that's got even more contrast. So going back to my character panel, I'm going to use this box again and just drag it all the way to the white. So we have white detail text. You can also adjust the font weight. Currently it's on Avenir Roman. Might want something a little thicker, like medium, black, and just see how that feels. The alignment that I have on this text, you can click over to the paragraph tab or go to Window, Paragraph. This is currently centered, and I think that looks pretty nice. I'm going to have this text tucked right under this headline. I'm going to move it just a hair. If you need to adjust leading, you want to select your text, and you can adjust how far away these lines are from one another. Next, we're going to add one more block of text. So select the type tool again. I'm going to click and drag a larger box this time. We're going to add some lorem ipsum and even more details about this event. So again, it populated this text box with centered type that's the same style as the text above it. I'm going to make this even smaller. We want this text to recede even more. I don't need it to be bold. I want it to be maybe kind of a regular font. We don't need this many lines. Let's go with 3 or 4 lines. And I'm also going to reduce the leading on this just a little bit. Okay, so the very last step in this design is we're actually going to add a cool texture on top of our graphics. I'm going to navigate on my computer. I have this as a halftone dot texture, and I'm just going to click and drag this into my artboard. It is a horizontal image. I need to make this bigger and make it match my space, and I'm actually going to rotate it as well. Let's go look at our layers so we can see what's going on. This is on top of our text layers and our image, and that's great. That's what I want, but obviously I want to see what's underneath it. We're going to use these what's called blending modes. These are really cool, and it's a great way to add subtle textures and add some transparency. With this halftone layer selected, I'm just going to test out a few of these blending modes. I often use multiply. You can kind of scroll through here and see the different effects that it does to your image. I'm also going to bump the opacity of this texture down just a little bit. I just want like a hint of the texture on top. It's currently on top of my type. I think that's a little much. So I'm going to drag that layer just to be above my photo. So the type is super readable, but it's really just evident in the top of this photo and in the surfer graphic. So this social media post is ready to go. You can go to File, Save. So we've saved our original file. And then last step is to go File, Save a copy. I'm going to save this on my computer, and I'm going to save probably a JPEG or a PNG to upload to my social media channels. So that's how you create a vertical social media graphic. In this tutorial, we will be learning how to crop to a specific pixel size and by aspect ratios using Photoshop. So open a file in Photoshop. You can use any image for this exercise. Let's select the crop tool. The crop tool is located in your toolbar on the left, and it's about the 5th tool down. When you select the crop tool, you should see some options pop up at the top of your screen. First, we'll talk about cropping using an aspect ratio. An aspect ratio is not a specific size, it is just a specific shape. When you have the crop tool selected, you should see a drop-down box at the top of your screen. This menu shows you all the cropping options and presets that are built into Photoshop. Select the 1:1 square aspect ratio. We now have a box on top of our photo that is in the shape of a square. You can also see at the top up here, it says 1:1. You can change your crop just by clicking the edge of this cropping box and dragging it. And then you can also move the cropping box around your image. If you're ready to crop, just hit enter or hit the check mark at the top right of your screen. So let's undo what we just did. Edit, undo crop. Next, let's make images a specific size using the crop tool. We might want our image to be a specific size for projects like an image on a website or a print project. Go to the drop down. Let's go to width, height, resolution. Let's crop this image for print, and we want it to be 4 inches by 6 inches. Type in the file size and the resolution that you want in these boxes up top. So I want a 4-inch width. So I'm going to type in 4in by 6 inches. And all images that are prepped for print must be a resolution of 300 pixels per inch. So type in 300. Resize your box however you want your crop to be and hit enter. I'm going to zoom back into my image so I can see it better. Now let's check our image size. I always recommend doing this before you are exporting images, especially if you need a specific image size. So go to image, image size. And we just want to check our dimensions here. And this looks correct to me. We cropped it to 4 inches by 6 inches at 300 pixels per inch. So let's click OK. So this image would be ready to export for print. Next, let's crop an image for web. Let's go edit, undo crop. Let's zoom back out. And up top, I'm just going to hit the clear button to get rid of all of this previous cropping information. Now this time, let's crop an image for the web. Let's make our image 1920 pixels. So I'm going to type px next to the number by 1080 pixels. Images that are going on the web need to be a resolution of 72 pixels per inch. So I'm going to type 72 in that third box. Resize your image, get the crop that you want, and click OK. Let's check our image size again. Go to image, image size. I'm going to select pixels here. So this looks correct. We have 1920 by 1080 at 72 pixels per inch. So click OK. So that's how you crop to a specific pixel size and by aspect ratios in Photoshop. In this tutorial, we will be exploring the retouching tools in Photoshop using 3 different photographs. First, we're going to start with this photograph of a lighthouse, and I'm going to show you the patch healing tool. We are first going to remove this lighthouse, just get rid of it completely. We are also going to remove the clouds, some of these details in the photograph. This tool often works best if there is kind of a blank space next to it that's about the same size. So in this case, we have this nice sky and we do have some hill right here that we can replace this lighthouse with. I'm going to select this tool for my toolbar. It's located over here, and I'm going to just trace around and make a complete circle around the lighthouse. And you want to close your selection so you can see the marching ants. This is now selected. When you hover over the lighthouse, you start to see a little arrow appear in the patch tool. What that arrow is indicating is that you should move your cursor to the right. So I'm going to click into the lighthouse and hold. I'm going to drag my cursor to the right. And you can see what it's doing. It is taking what is to the right and overlapping the lighthouse. I want to keep the ground kind of level, so you can see if I move it up and down, the ground disappears. So if you kind of keep it level and to the right, then that's going to work best. Okay, I'm going to release my cursor and see what happened. I'm going to deselect. Okay, the lighthouse is gone. This did an okay job. Let me zoom back in. See, we have kind of a halo effect, but up here in the sky, it did a really good job blending that sky, so it's completely seamless. What you can do next is go in here and just try it again, and just see if you can get a better result. There may be some other tools you have to pair this with to get this perfect. Okay, we're going to try the same patch tool on some of the clouds. So I'm going to circle these clouds up in the sky, drag my cursor to the right, and again, this just did a great job filling in the sky and making a seamless removal of those clouds. And it actually copied this little patch right here, so you can do this as much as you want to get the result that you're looking for. There's some other details in this photograph you can remove with the patch tool. Let's move on to a different photograph. And this time we're going to use a different tool. We're going to try the spot healing brush. So I'm going to zoom in. We are going to remove some of these sprinkles with the spot healing brush. It essentially takes pixels from around an object and fills it in for you. You can also make your cursor larger with this tool up here. I'm essentially just going to take this spot healing brush tool and paint over some of these sprinkles. And you may have to hit the move tool or a different tool to actually see the result. So I'm just going around and covering up the sprinkles one by one. And this is doing an okay job. I'm seeing some variation in my colors where the sprinkles were, so you can go back and just paint them again. But again, it's just kind of taking the colors that it sees around these sprinkles and filling it in. Another tool I'd like to show you, which is my favorite tool of all the retouching tools, is the clone stamp tool. This does kind of the same thing as the spot healing brush. It takes pixels from around an object and covers it up in this case. So let's go and remove a couple more sprinkles to show you how this tool works. Okay, so with the clone stamp tool selected, I am going to essentially select some pixels from the right of this yellow sprinkle and copy them on top, like clicking the Option key, selecting this area right next to it, and then I'm going to drag my cursor over and cover it. And you can see a preview of it as you're doing it, which is cool. Okay, so let's do a few more. I'm going to Option click, and I'm just going to cover and paint this sprinkle. Option click, cover the sprinkle. You can also copy over pixels from a different part of your photograph into a different area. I'm going to Option click this sprinkle right here, and I'm going to paint it over here. Option click a sprinkle here, and paint it over here. Option click, paint. Now let's go over to a new photograph and let's try to retouch some skin. And let's use some of the tools we just went over. Let's go back to our spot healing brush tool. I'm going to duplicate my layer here. And I'll show you why in a few minutes. Especially when you're editing someone's face, you can often overdo it, and you might want to bring back in a few of those imperfections and details. Let's go back and paint over these imperfections. My tool's a little weird sometimes. I have to click off to actually see it work. Yours may work fine. Let's go back in. I'm just going to touch up a few more spots on her skin. At this point, I might have over edited her face. If I wanted to maybe bring back in a few of those details, this top layer, you could change the opacity. So I could bring all of them back, or I can make this about 50%. So you can still see some of those imperfections, but they are just less noticeable. Okay, and if I were really editing this for a magazine or something, I would also want to get rid of all this hair up here, this wispy hair. And the clone stamp tool is my favorite tool to use in a situation like that. So to get rid of some of this hair, remember, we have to hit the Option key and click. And we want to just hit the Option key and click right outside of this hair. So we're getting the same color sky. So I'm just gonna paint. And hair can be a lot of work to cover up, so you can kind of do as much as you feel like is necessary. But you could get really detailed in here and get rid of all of it. And then last thing I would do is I would really go around her face and look. She has a lot of hairs kind of over her forehead. You might want to clean those up. Clone stamp tool is a really good tool to use for that. And then looking for other imperfections close up. Like I see some hair on her jacket as well, so you could clean that up. This might be a little more difficult to clean up with the clone stamp tool because of the pattern on the jacket, but you would just have to zoom way in and just select tiny little areas to cover that up. So that's how you retouch using Photoshop.
In this tutorial, we will look at Photoshop's Generative Fill AI tool. This tool allows you to easily remove, replace, and drastically change sections of a photograph. We are going to use AI to change some things about this photograph. So to use the AI tool in Photoshop, you do have to have the latest version of Photoshop, which is Photoshop 2024. So if you have an older version, make sure to update your software before doing this tutorial. So in this photograph, let's start by changing this man's outfit using AI. So to get started with Generative Fill, you have to select something in your photograph that you want to change. And then you're going to tell AI what you want to change about it. So I'm using the polygon lasso tool in my toolbar. I'm going to change his jacket to a different color shirt. So using this selection tool, I'm just going to loosely select around his jacket. And you have to close the selection. Just gonna go around his neck here. The selection is closed, and I can tell that by the marching ants that I see around the selection. And as soon as I select something, I got this Generative Fill AI pop-up box. If for some reason you don't see this, make sure you've selected something in the photograph and go to Edit and look for Generative Fill. You're going to our pop-up box. So now that I have a selection, I'm going to click Generative Fill. So I'm going to type my prompt here in this text box. I'm going to type red shirt, long sleeves. And you can get very detailed with this, or you can just put in a one-word prompt and see what happens. So now that I have my prompt, I'm going to click Generate. It's going to think for a minute. This is what the Photoshop Generative Fill came up with. And you can see on the right, it actually gives you 3 different options. I'm going to click through these. I said red shirt, long sleeve, and it only gave me one option that actually has a long sleeve red shirt. You can adjust this a little bit more. I'm gonna go back up here and maybe say something like red sweater, long sleeve, and I'm going to regenerate. So click generate again. You can move this box out of the way if it's covering up your subject. This is a little closer to what I was expecting. I now have 3 red sweaters, and let me click through the different options. There's a few strange things that I'm noticing. For instance, his body seems very narrow. It's also trying to recreate some of the plants, I think, that were in the foreground. I'm not sure what's going on here, so that one's a little weird. And then this last one, I do want to point out, anytime you're swapping anything in a photo and it involves hands, AI makes the strangest hands. There's some weird stuff going on here. That's kind of a fingernail, but not really. It's holding something. I don't think it does a very good job with hands. These are the variations that it's giving me, and these are all on a separate layer. You can very easily turn this on and off, this top layer, and see what your original was. As I mentioned, it narrowed this man a lot, and you can see it from the original. I'm going to stick with one of these. Okay, next thing we're going to change. Photoshop Generative Fill actually does an amazing job just removing things from photographs. In this photo, we are going to remove this plant that's kind of in the foreground here. It's a little distracting. Make sure got our background layer selected. I'm going to just select this plant, and I'm going to start at the bottom. I'm going to select the whole thing. Okay, so once I close the selection, I get my Generative Fill pop-up, going to click Generative Fill. And if you simply want to remove something from a photograph, you actually don't need to type anything here. Photoshop will blend your selection with the background and fill it in. So I'm just going to click Generate. And there we go. It removed that plant completely, and it's very seamless. I have 3 options here, and it's just giving me 3 different slight texture variations. But probably this first option is the best option. And let's go look at our layers. Again, it created another layer for this, and you can turn it on and off. We have one more little plant in the foreground that I will also select. Make sure I'm on my background layer. And let's do a generative fill just to remove this also. I think that looks pretty good. So if I wanted to use this photograph, I would simply save it as a Photoshop file or a JPEG. So let's move to a different photo, and I want to show you how drastically you can change a photo with the Generative Fill tool. So in this photo, I'm going to change this building to a completely different building. I'm going to remove this man, and I'm also going to replace the field that you see in the foreground. So let's start with this cool building in the background. I'm going to select the building. I'm going to actually replace it with a skyscraper. So I want to select a little bit more of the space above it so it swaps the image out and there's room for a taller building. With the selection created, I'm now going to type in my AI prompt. So I'm going to say skyscraper, building, structure, and click generate. And let's see what it comes up with. So it's now giving me 3 different building options. I think I like this middle one the best. Next, let's go back to our background layer. We're going to remove this man completely. I'm just going to select him, click Generative Fill, and since I'm just removing him, I'm not going to put a prompt in. Photoshop will know to kind of fill in that space with the surroundings. So clicking Generate only, let's see what happens. That did an excellent job removing him. I have a couple options here, but I think the first one works great. And then the last change I'm going to make, I'm going to swap out this foreground for a completely different field. Going back to my background layer, I'm going to just select the entire foreground and this field of grass. Click Generative Fill, and I want to fill this field with a field of flowers. I'm going to type that in, field of yellow flowers. Click Generate. Okay, so here's what Photoshop came up with. I'm going to click through these, see what works best. Wow, this is interesting. This put city in the background too. I think this one looks pretty good. So going back to our layers panel, remember if I turn this off, look how different this photograph was when we started. So we removed the man, we changed the building, and we added a field of flowers, and it actually added a cityscape as well. So that is how you use the Generative Fill AI tool in Photoshop. So I'm so proud of you for finishing this course. I'm sure it took a long time, and that is amazing that you got all the way through. You may be asking, what's next? How can I keep learning Adobe Photoshop and continue my knowledge? So on my CryStudio channel, I offer lots of other beginner Photoshop tutorials. I also have lots of tutorials for other Adobe software that graphic designers use all the time, including Adobe InDesign and Illustrator. You can also find links to some free graphic design resources at the bottom of this video. So go check out the link to that. And subscribe to CryStudio to learn more about Adobe software and graphic design. Thanks so much.